Hi, I'm Michelle Sterling for Friends of Science Society. On March 15, 2019, cities across Canada witnessed the Greta Thunberg-inspired climate strike with dozens and, in Montreal, thousands of school kids, youth, and some adults striking from school to march for the climate. Well, let's not argue about the climate issue for a moment. Let's talk taxpayers' money. In Alberta, my province, CBC reported on February the 18th, 2018, that the Alberta government spends $9.8 billion a year on education. Yet, all these kids who hit the street to protest were turning their backs on this incredible investment in their futures. How much is $9.8 billion? Well, here's $100 million in packets of 10,000, and here's $1 billion. 9.8, let's just round that up to 10. So you see that little person in there for scale? That's your mom. That's your dad. That's your older brother who got laid off from the oil sands job. That's your sister working long hours and overtime as a nurse. That's your cousin who spent most of the winter in the deathly cold, clearing highways so that your uncle could drive to work the next morning to his high-tech job. That's your best friend's mom, who's a dispatcher at EMS working the night shift to make sure that people can get ambulance, fire, or police services when they're in trouble. That's $9.8 billion that the Alberta government spends on education per year to make sure you have a future. And what do you do with that exceptional gift generated by hardworking Albertans? You mock it. You spurn it. You walk off your job of learning to protest in the streets for climate action. And you do that without doing any research. So much for all that education money. You've got a brain and the internet, so use them. You protest about pollution? Look it up. The National Air Pollution Surveillance Site. Here's what your parents and grandparents have been paying for the past 50 years. Pollution reduction. And look how well they did. Canada has air quality that's in the top 3 in the world. You don't believe it? Well, try this online air pollution map. You can see how air quality will change due to weather conditions and summer wildfires, but overall, your air is clean. What about climate? You demand climate action now. Well, in Alberta, the province has been taking climate and environmental action since before you were born. Here's the 2002 climate change legislation and a 2008 summary progress report of all the broad-reaching initiatives on climate and environment that were taken years before you were born. And what about the present spending in Alberta on climate action? 7% of the budget of the province was spent on climate initiatives in Alberta. That's only 1% less than the $9.8 billion spent on education. The education that you walked away from to demand climate action that's already being taken. So do your homework, kids. You're embarrassing yourselves and your teachers, and especially all the taxpayers who are paying billions of dollars so that you can learn to use Google search. Just think, for one day of climate strike in Alberta, $9.8 billion divided by 100 school instructional days, $98 million a day that you cost the school system. And for that, what could we do for First Nations in Canada? What kind of housing could we provide? What kind of fresh water? $98 million a day. And you're planning on striking more than one day. And what about the rest of the world? Well, based on the cost of about $1,000 per student for education for a year in Kenya, you could have sent over 1 million poor African kids to school for a year. But climate strikers want national climate action. Really? Have you any idea how much is now being spent on climate action at the national level? Our report, Dark Green Money, details the huge taxpayer-funded climate budgets out of Ottawa. And who pays for that? Your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your uncle and aunt, your friends' parents, and all the other working folk of Canada. While you protest in the streets, kids, for something that's already being done, ordinary people are hard at work paying billions on various climate and environmental programs. And furthermore, these hard-working, tax-paying Canadians are also forced to underwrite environmental charities for billions of dollars every year, while many of these groups are blocking the tax-paying jobs that your education and climate action plans rely on. And what about internationally? Well, that's a far grander scale than your tax-paying parents, relatives, and friends' families are paying for too. Far grander. If you look at the 2030 sustainability goals as outlined by Canada's present federal government, the numbers are staggering. The spending commitments alone are eye-opening. $180 billion for infrastructure, of which $20 billion is for green infrastructure, $28.7 billion for public transit, $25.3 billion for social infrastructure, and $10.1 billion for trade and transportation infrastructure. This document expresses a profound belief that all of this will increase Canada's future prosperity, but it ignores the fact that apart from the trade and transportation investments, there's no obvious reason why there should be any economic benefit to Canadians. So, is that enough climate action for you kids? Did your parents know the tab was getting so large? Surprise! Listen, I have close friends from Asia, and they tell me that in their city, schools run on shift work with classes of 60 kids and one teacher. One morning shift till noon, a whole new set of kids come in for the afternoon, and another set for the evening shift. That's how they maximize their limited resources. Look at any of the Christian charities working overseas in developing nations. The kids there sit in small, squalid schoolhouses, often no running water or toilets, just an outhouse. They might not even have a pencil or a notebook, and some lessons are learned by rote, simply by repeating the information till it's all memorized. No Google for those kids, no school bus to the door, and many of them have to walk an hour or two to school and back. Lots of them don't even know what a school lunch means. They have little or no food. None of them have a portable water bottle, but many of them are walking in the baking hot sun. But no, you turn your back on Alberta's $9.8 billion for education and demand climate action that already exists. As a taxpayer and citizen, I find that reprehensible. Look it up. And the fact that you spurn the many gifts of education and opportunity that you're given by your family and forebears, while millions of children around the world would give anything for such an opportunity, I find that immoral. Go back to school. Learn something. Science, math, history, geopolitics, and gratitude. Lots of people are working and demanding dirty, emotionally challenging jobs and paying taxes so that you can grow up to be a smarter generation. Those people sometimes protest too. Here's a pro-pipeline rally. Look, these people came out on their lunch hour, made their views known, and went back to work because they respect the work ethic of being on the job, on time, and with responsibility. Most of these people went to school and higher education for almost 20 years to get their basic and professional designations. These are the people whose tax dollars pay for your education. And that's why we see people around the world in yellow vests protesting carbon taxes and unrealistic climate and energy policies, because there's a limit to what people will pay and a limit to the nonsense people will put up with. So one last note, climate activist kids, cutting class won't make you an ideal pick as an employee down the road, especially when you can't get the fundamental facts right before you hit the street to protest. For Friends of Science Society, I'm Michelle Sterling.